Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our first hybrid Heritage Wilmot meeting. Welcome also to those tuning in or viewing online, either live or afterwards. I'd like to start off with a territorial acknowledgement. We have gathered virtually in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community. Moving on to disclosure of pecuniary interest. Do any members have any pecuniary interest to disclose? Seeing none. Next, we have the minutes from our last meeting on September 14th. Any questions, comments, submissions, additions? Yvonne?
I only noticed there was a typo for Jen Fenning's name. Counselor is, I'm not sure what the word counselor was changed to, but it's not counselor.
There's an extra H.
That's the only thing I found.
Thanks, Yvonne.
And the minutes are great as usual.
Anyone else? Alicia and Artem, can you hear us okay? Awesome. All right, motion to approve with Yvonne's amendment. Marg, second. Yvonne, all in favor? That is carried. So Harold, I guess Sherry's not there. I'll just update the minutes with that one change, and I'll just send the revised version. Okay. Excellent. Moving on to business, the first item under there was Heritage Day 2023. Just thought we'd have a discussion on details, date, location, agenda. So I thought we could talk about and maybe finalize on what we'd like to do as a committee. I know, Yvonne, you've been in touch about a potential speaker. So I don't know if you had anything you wanted to update the group in that regard.
He's just said that once we decide details, date and the topic, then he will be happy to accommodate us.
Great. And were they thinking it was an in-person event? Or they're good with either?
We don't know.
Okay.
That's what we're talking about tonight, right?
But the speaker would be good with either option?
Well, it was a hybrid presentation at the KPL. There were some issues with the sound quality when he moved around a lot. So, but that's something that, is dealt with, and, we've got high quality people doing the technique stuff here, so I'm sure it can work out one way or another. So.
Okay. Anyone else thoughts on Heritage Day? I keep looking at the screen too. Yeah, I was thinking it'd be good to save the date out before the holidays, possibly. Just so we can get it in people's calendars before we get into January already. So to do that, we need to pick a date. So, Harold, was there a date that you had floated? I can't quite recall.
I believe we had talked about February 22nd, perhaps, or 23rd.
What day of the week is that, or where are we?
I believe it was a Wednesday night.
A Wednesday? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the 22nd would be a Wednesday.
And that's February 20th, okay. And the time? 7? I hope not 6:30, it's too early. Well, I'm suggesting 7.
I think 7 would be good. Yvonne, was there the event that you were at? Was it a kind of a 7 o'clock evening thing?
Was it?
I think it started at 7. There were 2 planned speakers, but there was only one speaker, but he did speak for over an hour, I believe. Yeah, it was over an hour. And then there were question and answer. But, that whole evening was just the speakers. And I think what we have to decide is that what we're planning on doing, or are we going to have other things like displays, or, just kind of talk about how we envision this possibly going, because this is a late start for us for planning for Heritage Day, right?
Yeah. What are everyone's thoughts on if we want to have something where we have displays like we have done in the past, or should we just have a evening session with a speaker?
Do you mean a display at a location where people would come, like live, or do you mean like the speaker would be talking to us and we'd invite the public? So, but then it would also be on, YouTube, so people at home could watch it. But you're not referring to getting together a display at a community center. I think it's a little tight for that timing.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking if we had a speaker come to a place, then we could maybe have a few displays set up. Like, for example, if it was here, maybe there's some space to have some displays up for the Heritage Wilmot or the Castle or ACO, or like maybe a couple of the heritage organizations.
That's a good idea.
That was just an idea I had. It may or may not work.
Yeah, okay.
Or it could be, if this was the spot we wanted to have the event, we could have maybe downstairs area could be some displays.
Yeah. If we did have an in-person meeting, with a speaker that we're thinking of who was excellent, where would we have it? I mean, where we can invite enough people? Here in the chamber, or the community room, or where?
I think that would be ideal to do it here because the equipment would be set up for, to broadcast it to YouTube.
Right.
But then, again, the community room downstairs, if there was refreshments or, that afterwards with some displays, that would work nicely here, depending on the size of the crowd. Or you could possibly do it at WRC if it was a bigger crowd, but size-wise, this would be able to hold a fair number of people, and the acoustics would be good for
Yeah.
a presentation as well. So
Well, I think that's
I
a
think
great
it would
idea.
be probably ideal to have it here if we could.
Al?
Well, you could also have an overflow downstairs as well, like we did for the initiation of the inaugural council meeting. I was in the overflow downstairs.
Okay.
That's a good point. There is that, we do have the technological ability to broadcast what's happening here down to the room downstairs, which we do, so that's a good point.
I don't think the rec complex is really set up for the like the technology we'd need for this anyway, would we?
It probably wouldn't be yet, but, so that would be another challenge. Anything is possible, but this would be ideal. I would expect the IT staff would prefer to do it here where they've got everything set up, so I would suggest that would be ideal to do it here.
Mark?
I think the cookie and juice and display downstairs is a great idea, because then you can mingle and talk, and you have your formal presentation here. I think that's excellent.
And maybe if the presentation started at 7 or 7:30 even, we could have, downstairs for half an hour ahead, and then a bit of time after possibly. That sounds like a fun evening.
That's great.
Al?
Yeah, since I was away for a while, I think it might be good to give a bit of an update, and also for the people watching as to,
And maybe if
the speaker or the theme or whatever now, so.
I don't know a lot about the speaker. I know it was a speaker that Yvonne was at, and it was an event at the library. And Mark or Yvonne, if you had some details about
And Yvonne and I were both there, and it was
right.
sponsored by the jointly sponsored by Kitchener Public Library and the North Waterloo Region Branch of the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario. So, and we invited Gary Warwick, who's a retired professor in, what was it, archaeology? At the Brantford campus of Wilfrid Laurier University, and his talk was excellent about Indigenous people, where they settled along the Grand River, how they grew their corn. It was a fantastic night, and everybody in the audience really appreciated it. There were close to 50 people there, and he walks back and forth on the, the only thing that he would need would be a mic right here.
Oh, yeah.
Because once you wander away from one of these stand-up, that would solve the whole problem. But he was excellent.
Excellent. Yeah, I just couldn't remember the name. I knew there was the archaeology focus, but I couldn't remember the name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lisha or Artem, did you have any thoughts you wanted to share? I can't always see if you have your hand up or anything.
Nothing. Meeting in person, or like a half in person, half virtual is great.
Great. Okay, well then I think we may have a date set, the 22nd or 23rd, and we'll plan for an evening event, and we will have some displays downstairs, and we'll have a speaker in this room. Do we need to check availability of the speaker for either of those dates?
Well, I can check with him.
Okay.
He hasn't said that he's not available.
Okay.
He's just waiting to hear back from us, and he'd probably be more than willing to speak on the topic that he did or expand on it. I had thought that if he could zero in maybe a little bit more on the Wilmot area, because he talked about, it was called Kitchener-Waterloo area, but what he actually talked about was Waterloo region all the way south to Lake Erie and the lands that, just the whole area. So I think it would be really interesting if he was able to maybe zero in a little bit more on like locally rather than, just do a broad overview, but then maybe zero in a little bit on Wilmot area.
I think that would be great.
Okay.
Mark?
We need an overall organizer, somebody in charge, and then working with the township and everything, because can't leave it all to Mr. Okrafka. He'll be too busy.
That's a good idea, Mark. Is anyone passionate about working on organizing?
Or could we have co-organizers?
Sure.
What do you think, Yvonne? Because you're a good co-organizer. And Patty, a triple treat.
Well, I'm the person who's going to be getting in touch with Gary anyway.
Yeah.
So sure, I can help with the organizing. And
Right,
then-
I will too.
Okay.
And we have to let people know about it, and also to you want to ask specific groups to do a display rather than putting out a general notice and hoping you get somebody. I'll volunteer the ACO for one display for sure.
Great.
So, okay. Patty, you willing to help, or are you busy? Yeah, oh, the three of us will do it.
Oh.
There we go.
Trio. It sounds like a subcommittee.
It is, yeah.
Sounds scary to me.
And I'm happy to help to look at wording for the reminder, things like that. And
Yeah.
Harold, I think you'd said that the township has some resources you could lend to putting together a mailing or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. And working with Sherry too as well on, poster or whatever advertisement. But yeah, we should be able to pull something together that's professional and attracts people wanting to attend.
And then the township will look after buying juice and cookies, right?
It will be in the budget.
Sherry, can you hear us now?
Yes, I finally can. Sorry about the delay.
Yeah, we can hear you too.
Yay!
Awesome.
You heard what we volunteered you for, Sherry, right?
Excellent. Anything else on Heritage Day? All right. Well, sounds like that's shaping up to be an event, so that's good. I think we can move on then to the next item, which is the Heritage Register of non-designated properties. And we put on there impacts of Bill 23. So I know we've been discussing some updates among the committee, and there's some revisions underway. There was some change in approach with how we handle the register with the new bill that was just passed. But I think it's still important to have the register updated as we planned. And I guess we'll see what it means for the implementation part, which is later on in the agenda anyway, but we can talk about it here now. So, Marg and Yvonne, I know that there's updates to the register that were planned, that we talked about those previously. And I think we have all the photos we need and descriptions for at least some of the properties. And I guess we just need to actually update the register to include those new additions. Yvonne?
So have what we've been working on actually been added? Because we have not seen any updates or any working copies of anything at this point.
Harold?
So we have not yet created that. Due to the impacts of Bill 23, we decided that to find out what Bill 23 was going to require, and then obviously the proclamations haven't been made on the components of Bill 23 in terms of setting out dates, but it would be prudent not to add something to the registry that we can't proceed on, lest it be off in 2 years and not able to come back on 5. So from a timing perspective, certainly we can bring that back at the next meeting with the updated what it would look like. But I think obviously when we get into the implementation, we're going to have to do a wholesale review as a committee of the properties to see which ones will meet the new criteria for designation, which ones reasonably have potential to be designated, because there's over 120 properties that, like, practically the ability to move 120 properties to designation in 2 years is.
But what would be the point then of us even moving forward with what we've got?
And that's
the
a
question, because
consideration,
we basically stopped in the middle of what we were working on, like literally, right? And so whether it's even worth proceeding with or doing any more work on that when everything is up in the air, right?
Yeah, and maybe this is a good time to talk about the Bill 23 implementation stuff anyway. So the bill did receive royal assent, as Harold mentioned. It's not fully in place yet in terms of what it means for implementation. But the big thing for the non-designated register is the province did approve the 2-year time frame that a property can be on the register for 2 years, and then they automatically come off. My understanding is it's just something that's passed by council to remove the properties. So they can be on for 2 years, and if they're not designated, then they get removed. And then the properties can't be added again for 5 years. So that certainly impacts our approach for the Heritage Register and how we want to move properties ahead or not. So there's that aspect too. So, Harold?
Yeah, and I think that's the component I would agree with you on, that we have to make sure that if we are adding something, that it's reasonably a property that could proceed to designation within 2 years. I guess the component that from a staff perspective I don't know is the proposed additions that had originally been planned to be made. Would any of those properties be the most critical property on the list to advance? That's the part where we would need that input from the committee in terms of, what are the top 10, if you will, on that list that we really need to focus on. that would be my suggestion, is that that's really what all heritage committees across the province are now faced with, is moving critical assets from a heritage perspective forward to designation, or recognizing that they would come off the list automatically and not be able to be added for 5 years. So that's a lot of work, I realize, and so I guess from a staff perspective, that would certainly, we'd be seeking that from the committee advice as to how much should we budget for designations, what's reasonable to consider, and how many properties would be in that critical aspect of we really need to move these forward. Certainly one component, and we've discussed it before, is where you have a willing owner of the property is a highly important component of that designation process.
Thanks, Harold. Yeah, certainly lots of changes and things to consider with implementation. Al?
Since we're sort of thinking out loud on this, I guess, Howie, you would know what areas are potentially slated for the development, and we could possibly be looking at what buildings on our inventory are in those areas of development, and that might be something to zero in on.
That's a good suggestion, Al. Harold?
Yeah, we actually did create a map that, the same map that Yvonne and Marg used when they were looking at the recent additions, for that purpose, to try to overlap, using the GIS, the heritage resources that have been identified with the growth areas, because obviously part of the updated planning policies is focused on intensification, and often heritage preservation and intensification projects collide, and not in a good way. And so your point is well taken, Al. I was going to call Councillor Juncker. Councillor Juncker, that certainly in terms of priorities, I think those kind of land use planning aspects are something that we could create a layer and a mapping to show the committee where you may have friction points between heritage resources and potential for redevelopment.
I like that approach. I think that makes sense. Certainly as a good starting point for how to whittle down our big list into a smaller list. Mark?
The work that Yvonne and I have done was largely to finish up Schneider's Road. There's a couple more left to do. That one's hard to do because you had to pull off the side of the road and traffic and so on. So there are about a half a dozen buildings there that we've done, maybe not quite. But then we did quite a few of them in New Hamburg with Howie's map, which was really good. And we have all of the properties that Yvonne and I felt, pretty much all of them, on Peel Street. Photographs are done. Yvonne does a great job of photographs. And then I write it up, not a little bit, few notes on site, but I do the majority of the work for Yvonne's photos, the architectural description. Mm-hmm. And those properties were ready to be put on the list, and then everything stopped. And now I get the sense that we cannot put those properties, add them to the list without going back over those properties and using the two criteria from 0609 in order for them to be on the list. And when I mentally think of the properties that we've done on Peel Street and apply the criteria, then a lot of them would no longer qualify. So what I would like to do is, instead of maybe putting them on the list because they don't really qualify, don't put them on the list, have a separate list, the building survey of Wilmot Township. Have two lists on the go, mm-hmm. so that information isn't just,
Yeah, I think that would be a valuable resource, certainly considering all the work that we've done to it, to have our inventory list, and then there's a official non-designated register that comes out of that list. Yvonne?
Yeah, just wanted to follow up to what Marg said, that I don't think any of the buildings that we recently surveyed meet those criteria to float to the top, right? Because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the cream, and then those are the ones that we will then move forward. And I guess the big question is, how many can we realistically actually designate in a year? That's huge, right? The amount of work that's involved. And I've not really been involved in that, so I really wouldn't know. But I think that's really important to consider. But I think the ones that we did, we were really happy to be able to add them, because they're the ones on Peel. They're right up against the heritage downtown area, anyway. Which is one of the reasons I'm glad that we did that. But I can't think of any of them that we would actually want to, that are sort of the cream for designation.
Mm-hmm. I think the other consideration too, that my understanding is the two criteria is not officially in place yet. That's still out for consultation. So that runs for another few weeks, I think, at least. And then, so that would be implemented through regulation. So the timing on that is a bit unknown. So it's kind of we're in limbo for the meantime, at least, in terms of the regulation. So for now, we just have to go based on the current regulation 906. Acknowledging it may change at some point. Mark?
No, Al can.
Al?
Yeah, I just want to return to what Mark said a couple of turns ago about a secondary list or whatever. When I first got involved back in 1988, there was no such thing as the heritage inventory, but there was 3 lists that existed in the township, and one was the primary list, or the CRIM. And most of if you go back, and I probably have that old list in my files somewhere if I haven't called them out already, almost all those buildings are now designated. But that's how we operated then, and it looks, based on Mark's suggestion, that looks like the new reality of, because that way that material is there, the research is done, and you can refer to that list. Because sometimes what we do is we'd bump a building that was on this secondary kind of list, do some more work on it, and then move it up. Well, then we had the creation of the heritage inventory, which was, a massive step forward, which, now is taking a huge, huge hit. So I think, that is the way that we should proceed. Mm-hmm. But we're going to have to develop some kind of criteria as to how we rank these places.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Maybe really what we end up with is our current register of the 100+ properties is just an inventory now. And then from that list, we put our official heritage register of the, the buildings for the next 2 years of what we're going to look at or be focused on. And then we just bring properties forward from the inventory as needed or interest. I wonder if maybe a working group would be a good idea to go through the register we have now and start to prioritize what we think are the top ones, or either in-person meeting, just go through it, or share thoughts over a Zoom meeting or email. We could do that. Al, did you have your hand up a minute ago?
Yeah, I was going to ask something else, but I think that it would be probably a good idea if that became a sort of a separate working meeting, and should be in person. We can have this list in front of us, and then we can go through it.
Well, that way, if we did an in-person, then we could actually lay out the map, right? And then look at the development areas, compare the list, and then, just kind of whittle down, and then maybe just, start grading the properties, and maybe looking at the ones that have been considered in the past. And then I guess this is sort of related, is it? And it might already be on the agenda about the mill, because there was, I think, Nick, you and Tracy had approached them. So,
we did.
I mean, that might fit into this as well, right?
Mm-hmm. That's true. So then we could add the new properties to the inventory list, since that work was already done, and then that ends up being not the official register, but from that we put together what the register would be. Harold, I guess the other component is how that implementation will work from the township, and when the register comes forward, or And maybe that's the unknown, is what happens to the current registers that municipalities have.
Right. Well, yeah, and I think we definitely need the answer to that question, but I think the whole discussion, I think most municipalities, like I know Cambridge is over 600 properties on their non-designated registry. I don't think any municipality is probably planning on just throwing it in the bin in the corner and walking away from it. Everybody's going to keep those lists. It's what's going to fuel, they're basically creating a prioritization list, for lack of a better word, is how I would take this. Is the only things on the official non-designated registry are the things that are actively moving to designation, and everything else is the bench, if you will, the heritage bench, if you want to use a baseball analogy, right? They're sitting on the bench waiting to move up to the playing field.
It still feels like we're throwing everything in the garbage. It's just...
It may not have official status, but it's still there. Mark?
Yeah, okay, I think some of the solutions we've talked about are great, that we have two lists, the non-designated register, and then a survey list, but then somehow from the non-designated register, we have to choose the ones to be designated, and they have to have two of the 906 regulation criteria, which is not that easy to come by. But the real problem, as I see it, or one of the problems, is that in order to carry on with the non-designated list or put buildings on it in future, you have to have two of these to qualify. And before Bill 23, you didn't have to have any of that for a non-designated list. Only, and it was only one of these this criteria for a designation. This is not going to be easy.
Yeah. And the other part that we don't know yet is, do they mean 2 out of the 3 or 2 out of the 9? Because each of the 3 has subsections. So is it 2 of 9 or is it 2 of 3?
I believe it's 2 of 9, but we need a definitive answer on that. If it's 2 out of 3, we're in real trouble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lots up in the air. Al?
Yeah, I haven't seen that list, but I'm afraid if I really want to see it or not. I guess it's going to mean that only the creme of the creme in that province is going to get designated, and properties which are important but didn't belong to the James Livingstons of the world are all going to not have any protection at all, or very little protection, because they're not going to meet these new criteria.
They're not important enough.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, this is sort of going off on a bit of a tangent, have we really as a committee voiced an official opinion? I mean, I know it's passed and it's received royal assent, but I think we really need to go on record as saying what we think about this and what it means. I mean, I have done it, on a personal level, because I responded to a petition that was out there and signed and stated why I thought I don't know if any of you saw it or not. Yvonne, you might have. But I think as a committee, we need to make some kind of statement about the impact this is going to have.
Well, and consultation's still open for the changes to OREG 906, and also I believe on the new heritage toolkit for a little while longer. So certainly that's something we can take a look at. Mark?
I agree that there should be at least be an expression of grave concern about these developments, and I'm sure that all the other heritage groups are thinking the same thing. So if we can all do that, then there'll be a bigger voice anyway.
Mm-hmm. Mark, you were going to say something too?
So I wondered if we might take one step back. The suggestion that we form a committee to go through this non-designated register, I think, is a good idea. It's too big a job for all. I mean, we need to. So I think we need to either have volunteers for this committee or, well, we do need volunteers. So I'm wondering if we can establish that tonight.
Certainly.
And we can work on it over the Christmas holidays.
That sounds good. Anyone, Al?
Well, I mean, when I suggested that, I thought we should actually meet as the committee of the whole, just separately, not as part of our formal meeting to do this. And then that would, we would report back to the committee with what, whatever we come up with. And so that we're not, that would be, to me, make the most sense rather than having this, I mean, if people don't want to be involved, but I think it should actually be a committee of the whole meeting where we're only dealing with that.
And I agree on that, thinking that there's quite a bit of information about these properties that isn't in the on the Heritage Registry. It isn't asked for. So if it was if it was used for a commercial establishment that was important, that's not necessarily there. But if you can get enough minds together, you're more likely to find those things.
Thanks, Patty.
Yeah, I agree. I think it should be the committee of the whole. I think we all need to, have the back and forth and really drill down, and because we may, some of us may find certain buildings more, it all comes down to evaluating, and that becomes a personal thing regardless, right? I mean, how do you decide when you look at the number of buildings that we have? But it's something that, this isn't going to go away. So I think we have to at least start working on it and kind of wrap our heads around how to possibly move forward, right?
Thanks. Mark?
I would agree with that, and I brought my list with me just as backup, and we can deal with it. I think Al's suggestion is very good, and so is Yvonne's. But I just wanted to mention that the Heritage Register of Non-Designated Properties for the Township of Wilmot is probably the best in the province. I have gone in on various sites and looked at the websites for the different areas and townships and cities, and ours is really, really good.
I agree. Also looked at lots of lists, and the detail we have is really not common, so it's good. Any thoughts, Arden, Militia, or Sherry?
Yeah, I do agree on meeting as a committee as a whole to discuss the list. I mean, we got to pick 2 or 3 out of 100.
Yeah.
I agree as well. I think we should meet as a whole committee to see which ones are the most attainable and the most beneficial, to get those designated as soon as we can.
Okay, well, we'll coordinate something, schedule that works. Excellent. Okay, anything else on the non-designated register? Good for tonight. Next item under business I had then was water lot redevelopment update. So following our last meeting, I know, Harold, you've been in touch with the applicant about coming back to the committee with a revised concept. They are working with a new architect now, and they're working to continue to finalize the design. My understanding is that they're looking at early 2023 to come back to the committee. So I guess we'll wait and see. Harold, I don't know if there was anything else to add. Okay. So that's really just the quick update on that one. So moving on to new business, the first item under there was Bill 23 implementation, which I think we've already touched on. Anything else anyone wanted to add under Bill 23? All right, I think we can move on then. Next item was Castle Kilbride porch renovations. So I understand from Sherry, there's some renovations planned for the new year, just on some of the porches. So I don't know if you mind sharing a bit of that information with the group. That'd be great.
Sure, I'd love to. So these projects for the front and the side porches has been in the works for a couple of years. It's been a capital project which was started at the beginning of the year and is going to be carried over into next year. I want to begin by thanking Amber Schenk, the project coordinator for the Township of Wilmot, who's organized all aspects of this project, and she's done a phenomenal job. So for the front porch, in a nutshell, she was able to find craftsmen who can handle the scope of the porch. The entire front steps need to be rebuilt. And due to the intricate nature, this company brought in a 3D, did a 3D scan of it to ensure that it's going to be replicated detail for detail. For the side porch, she brought in a structural engineer to investigate why there was a bit of a sag in the lower porch. And they found out that it was the compression of a support beam around the parameter, which will need to be replaced. And there are a few other pieces on that side porch that will need to be replaced at the same time. And with that going in, the new beam, they'll have to shore it and jack it very, very slowly to return the porches to their original placement. And on that side porch as well, those steps need to be completely, and pedestals need to be completely rebuilt. And again, it's going to be detail for detail and exactly replicated to what is there. And then once everything is finished, it's going to be primed and painted, and then it's going to be placed on the 5-year maintenance schedule. So we're quite excited that the front steps are scheduled to be installed probably in May, and then the side porches will occur after that.
That's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
That's very exciting.
Yes.
And so you said the front porch is first and then the side porch?
Yes, actually the front porch, the steps are being built over the winter time in their shop. And then really what's going to happen is the front steps that are there right now are going to come off, and the new one is going to be installed immediately, which I'm quite excited to see that process.
Excellent. Thanks, Sherry. Any questions from the committee? Al?
This isn't a question, this is just an observation. When the castle was restored, actually, Sherry, Herners did the exact same thing. Everything was put together in their shop in Dayton, and then they moved it up here and installed it. So same technology or methodology is being used this time.
Amber was actually met with Dave Herder when the project first started and was able to get all of his detailed notes. So we're going to have a nice progression of what was done in '94, what was done in around 2010 to 2014, and then what's going to be done in 2022. So it's going to be nice to have all of these on record and put into the archives.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, Sherry, for sharing those details. If there's nothing else on that, we'll move forward to correspondence. So the item I had under there was Bill 23 responses. So the agenda had some links to the responses for Community Heritage Ontario, the Architectural Conservancy, and then the Ontario Association of Heritage Professionals. Those were all in the link that was sent around. So there's just there because there's a lot of correspondence that was put together for the bill, and there's lots of great material there. So it was just there as a reminder and encourage people to take a look at it. The bill, of course, is now in place, so the input is, I guess, past now, but still there out of interest. Any other correspondence anyone had? Al?
I was just going to respond to your last comment. I read something today that, and it's a long shot, but people should still continue to raise their concerns. And I know this is really coming from the Greenbelt protection people, but it's all part of the, the huge omnibus legislation that is in Bill 23. And they pointed out that if enough people continue to pressure, the Premier did back down on the notwithstanding clause when the pressure built. Now, we're not going to be able, we may not be able to put together the same amount of pressure as in that case, but, you know, people should not fall silent. They should continue to express their concerns.
Thanks,
So
Al.
following up on that, we did briefly talk about sending a letter. Will we be sending a letter from the committee?
Yeah, if there's interest in people
Yes.
drafting something, certainly.
Well,
We can put something together.
who will draft that?
Any volunteers? I could put down some thoughts on just things that we've discussed around our office, just with our heritage group as a start, and then maybe that's something we can build on. So I can do that. I'll aim to do that kind of over the weekend and send you guys something to take a look at. And I better jot it down so I don't forget.
Don't worry, I'm jotting it down right now.
Great. And then next item, we have, oh, Mark?
I have a question of an item on the second last one in the minutes. I should have known, it's just the one that says Amish Bicentennial. Tracy noted their events being organized, including bus tours and workshops, showing the information would be sent around to the committee. I wondered, is that next year, the Amish Bicentennial, no? It's which? 2021? 2022? 2022.
I see Sherry nodding.
Oh, so it's over and
Correct.
done with.
It was at the end of September, and we did have a small group that put us on the list to come and visit, but there was a few
Okay.
activities that were planned around the area. But I don't think it was kind of as big as it was anticipated in the beginning.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, Sherry. Next item we have is roundtable info sharing. I wanted to mention, with this being the last meeting for a couple members, Alicia and Artem, I just wanted to say thanks for your contributions to the Heritage Committee and your efforts over the last number of years. It's been great having you both as part of the group, and I hope you both enjoyed your time on the committee as well. And perhaps our paths will cross again someday. So, round of applause. I just wanted to mention that, so thank you. I won't make you do a going away speech. Unless you want to, of course. Any other info sharing anyone had? Al?
Yeah, I don't have the data on this. Maybe Howie does. If he doesn't, that's fine. I believe it's coming up in January at the WRC, and I'm not sure the day of the date, but I know it's the day of a Firebirds hockey game. They are celebrating the 70th anniversary of junior hockey in New Hamburg. So that dates back to the original Legion team and the CL Rotes and the Hans and the Spirit of '83 and the current Firebirds. And I think it's an event that starts in the afternoon and culminates with a hockey game that night. So people should really go to that. I'm planning to go. It's open to players, executors, and fans. And I was never a player or an executive. I was a fan. I wasn't much of a player. I did not make it to that level of hockey. But it should be an interesting day. The junior hockey has a long history here. A lot of especially during the 1960s. And Brian Poff, I believe, is the one who's organizing it.
Excellent. Thanks, Al. Howard?
Yeah, so it's January 7th at the WRC, and actually Sherry and I have been in contact with Brian Poff about doing a display related to junior hockey. I have an extensive puck collection that we'll put on display with some photos and whatever Sherry can find in the archives, but we should be able to do some nice displays in those cabinets upstairs to support the event and the local Firebirds team. So January 7th is the date of the celebration.
Excellent. Thanks, Harold. Anything else? I'm looking at the screen too. I don't see any hands up. So then, last item is next meeting. So with it being end of November, I propose we probably don't need a December meeting, but we'll aim to meet as a group to go over the register, and then maybe we come back in January. So our usual meeting would be the second Wednesday, so that would be the 11th, and then a meeting after that would be February 8th. I don't know if we want to hold those dates or if we'd like to do something different. Harold, I think you had a conflict on the one day. Mark?
Are we going back to the second Wednesday? Because we've been the third Wednesday for a while.
We could do the third Wednesday as well.
No, I mean, it
It's-
doesn't matter to me. It was a technical or something or other that we chose the third Wednesday. So what is the second Wednesday in January? The date? I don't have it.
Yeah, the second Wednesday is the 11th.
Oh,
Yeah. We were the first one for a while, and then I think there was conflict with the Committee of Adjustment when we moved to online meetings, so then we've been the second. But you're right, we have done the third for a couple months as well. So,
well, the second's fine.
second is good.
Still 6:30 or are we going 7?
Up to us. We can decide. 7?
Well, yeah, I don't have to have supper that early then.
Well, especially if we're able to meet here now. We could give people extra time to get here.
Okay.
Harold, should we move the meeting if you're not available the 11th, or can Cameron possibly
Well,
join?
the 11th is fine, yeah. Definitely staff will be here. Sherry's available
Okay.
between the two departments.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. The 11th is fine.
Okay, great.
Okay, good.
So January 11th at 7 o'clock? Good
Awesome.
of everyone?
Yep.
All right, anything else? Going once, twice? Motion to adjourn? Al? All right, we are adjourned.